The relationship is the strategy. Why Queensland's smartest businesses are done chasing leads. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Queensland Business Stories, brought to you by connectedplatforms.com.au. IT done right, done better. Today, we welcome Michelle O'Hara, one of Brisbane's most distinctive strategic marketing voices, an entrepreneur who's spent more than 20 years building businesses, speaking on international stages, and helping Queensland's growth stage companies figure out why their marketing isn't working and what they can do about it. Look, thank you for joining us on our very first episode of Queensland Business Stories. How are you going today, Michelle?
After that intro, fantastic. Thanks so much, Chris. Good to be here.
Well, thank you for joining us. Look, we're going to, this is a bit of an experiment for us. We're sort of going down this path of looking at what's going on in Queensland specifically, because we've sort of found there's not a lot of people necessarily talking about Queensland businesses, and we've got a lot to offer in this this state that I think you're a great example of. Let's start people on this journey with a little bit of a background to you, a little bit of a background of your career path, because it really wasn't the typical trajectory that people take on their career. What's the through line for you? What was it that sort of got you to where you are? Tell us a little bit about your story.
Sure. It's a long story. I think the main crux of it all, though, is that I've always been in roles related to people. So, from 14, starting out in retail with shoes, which I love and still love, through to hospitality, events. And I started my first business, 20 years ago. And the main thing that sort of shone through was the fact that I would work my way up very quickly in business. But then if I found that the organization wasn't looking after the staff and the clients in a certain way, then it was time for me to go. So for me, starting my own business was very much about that, caring for people and caring for the staff, because without that, we don't have businesses, right? So that's really the main crux of everything, really.
And I want to dig a lot more into that, because I certainly feel passionately about the people aspect of this. And particularly, we talked a little bit before we were recording this about AI, and there's a lot of angles I want to go down there. But first of all, I just want to talk about the marketing angle, because marketing, it's been around for quite a while now. It's a full service marketing company you've had a lot to do with over that period of time. But that seems to be changing a little bit, that market. You talk us through a little bit about your experience there, what you built there, and what you think is changing, because I think that's going to be something that's quite interesting to this audience.
Yeah, definitely, Chris. And many might know I've literally just sold marketing last week. But you're right. Look, when I first started out in business, it was old school. You met people, you did a great job, you created a relationship, you had loyalty. And so when the digital age came in, I mean, I fought it back in the day too, to be honest, but I worked out very quickly that you could use social media platforms to get your message out to thousands fast, and be seen in front of all those people very quickly. And to me, that was wonderful, because you didn't have to meet people one-on-one. So it was quicker to get out there. I think what's happened over time, and don't get me wrong, because technology is wonderful. Like, we love the AI platforms. It's speeding up everything in regards to, it's allowing us to process things faster. It's creating efficiencies. It's got all of that, but what hasn't changed, and I feel like what's missing now from the marketing piece for business, is the strategic piece. And I think that is where we have really been able to grow marketing, because, it's all good to say, I need SEO, I need social media, I need, but until you have that overall strategic plan of how all your offline and online strategies come together, and then you know what to measure related to your business goals, then how do you even know that the marketing is working? So I think it's very easy for businesses to look for silver bullets, and then wonder why it doesn't all work. And I think that's been the hardest part of my whole journey, and probably even for myself, to be honest, because, we're a bit like the plumbers. We market ourselves last. But having that plan in place and then following through on the plan, all of the plan across all of the channels is really the most important. But particularly here in Queensland, very different to Sydney and Melbourne, is the relationships. It's,
Yep.
84% of businesses talk about most of their business coming from referrals. Over here, we are still a little country town. And so it's really important to do a good job, but then it's really important to keep those relationships strong. And then I like to think of the technology as enabling all of that to make it all do it stronger and better.
And there's a lot I want to explore on those angles, because I do think you've pulled all of them in together really nicely. I was looking at some of your work prior to recording here, and you talk about 80-20 in a way that I think is really interesting, that ties in what you were just saying well, where your idea of 80-20 is a little bit different, I think, to what a lot of business owners are told. You're talking about spending 80% of the time on the nurturing, not so much on the acquisition. So the 20% on the acquisition, that's probably a good example of what you were just describing in a way. Maybe that hasn't changed. Maybe that's always been the case, but certainly a way that people don't think about what they're doing with that human lens. It's an interesting one to me. Talk us through that a little bit.
Mm. Well, Chris, it's interesting because every year, we're constantly looking at what's going on. Like, I love business. I love, talking to business owners, seeing what's happening in the market, looking at the economy, looking at the trends. Bloody government putting the interest rates up again, the Reserve Bank. But so what we found last year, when we look in December is when we're sort of planning to do client strategies again. And we found last year was a huge year for a lot of people. Everything sort of went off after the election last May.
Mm.
And by the end, people were exhausted. Business owners were exhausted. And so going into strategy for this year, so many, we waste so much energy in trying to get new business. But for this year, it was very much about, you've worked so hard to build all these new clients. Let's put strategies in place to actually now nurture those clients, really identify what other solutions we can provide to those clients, and which will make you more sticky, because things are going to get tougher as we go forward, right? It's, even though there's going to be a lot of work and there's going to be a lot of activity, there's going to be so much more pressure on cost. There's going to be so much more pressure on staff. All the pressures of business are going to come into play. Pressure of AI, technology. So we have to make sure that we've already built that amazing database of clients. So why go and waste all the extra energy on building more when we can make that pool, so much more profitable, really? So that's really where that 80-20 comes in. So utilizing, the processes, the systems, the technology, the keeping in touch to actually nurture those clients and give them more solutions and grow, and then also get them to ripple out the effect of the people that they know, more referrals, all that sort of stuff, rather than going and spending money on, we cut for our clients, cut the sponsorships, we cut the Google ads, we cut all the extra spending, because it was more about let's give them gifts, let's show them how much we care. It was a really different shift this year in regards to that 80-20 rule, but it does potentially shift every year or upon quarter. Like, that's why you've always got to be looking at from a strategic point of view as to what's going on in the market and the economy and all the trends and all that sort of stuff.
And I find that fascinating in the thought of where we are at the moment, because something that really is terrifying and exciting and all of that all at once is that AI angle. And it's interesting that you said that was sort of over this last year that there's been that shift, but I think that shift is going to be significant, and I think it's going to impact everyone who's watching or listening to this podcast, because ultimately your business is going to be touched by this. Many will already be nodding their heads going, it is already impacting us. But what's interesting about it for me is that when you think marketing in particular, a lot of what was previously inaccessible to people is going to be accessible. And what you just said about sort of inverting that to the human aspect could be the bit that a lot of people will miss. They'll go, now I've got all these AI tools. I can churn out all this content. I can make all these ads. I can, pretty much buy an audience. I don't think it's going to work that way. I think when everyone's doing it, it's diluting that quite significantly. How do you think about that?
Yeah, so true, Chris. And look, don't get me wrong, I love it. I love chat, I love Claude, I love Gemini. Um, co-pilots, okay. But what's missing, we have interns. We've got 4 interns with us at the moment, and we love interns because they come through uni, they come with all these great ideas. Um, but what we really see, and I've watched this happen, is that they're losing the ability to strategically think, and that's what I
Yep.
believe is going to be that point of difference for the future for our kids. But so, you can put, I just had this conversation at the office before coming with a couple of them, oh, do you mind if I just put all this into chat and write an article? And that's great, but where's the personal voice of the client, and where's the original content and thinking of the unique point of difference? And where's the strategically placing about what's important here with this article? So that's the sort of stuff where my comment was absolutely like gather information. First of all, how accurate is that information, which is really important because,
Mm.
you know, we're forgetting to then check it back if it is real. That's dangerous. And then how is it personalized? Because that's what's missing with the AI piece. And look, I love the AI piece. It's speeding up our process. It's helping with ideas. It's helping, with so many things, with processes, with automating, even making website landing pages, all that sort of stuff. It's fantastic, and I love it. But we just have to remember at every single touch point that you mentioned, to bring in the personal piece and the strategic piece, and really look through the different lens of the customer that you're trying to deal with, because even though we might have that AI side here, we have a human on the other end, so we can't forget that.
And I wonder, the intern piece is interesting to me there, because I wonder how much of the broad job, when we're talking marketing in particular, can be done by the AI. The next model, the model after that, who knows? It just becomes very, very good at doing all that. But there's still a bit that it won't necessarily be able to capture, particularly if you're looking for an edge, because if everyone can access that same tool, the sort of the point I was making before, and that you clearly make through everything that you're doing, it is that human connection. But what's the conversation then that you have to those interns that gets that bit extra? What is the bit that's missing that they need to put into their prompt, if nothing else?
Yes, it's definitely about the prompt. Well, it's yeah, you're right, because if you notice now across the channels, everything is looking the same. You'll get that, which I laugh. If I see the word elevate one more time, I'm going to break a screen. But you have the catchphrases, you have the layouts of the post now, and because I consume information, I consume a lot of information very fast. I see it quite quickly, these patterns. For the youngsters coming through and stuff, their ideas are still creative, and they too are consuming a lot across all the different channels. So what I am saying is utilize a combination of all the different things you're seeing, and then create something new with it. So, if you're seeing a trend over here in, say, conveyancing, like take that information and put it into how it might affect plumbing, or take something from the trucking industry and,
Mm.
plug it into how it might affect somebody else. And so let's cross pollinate, we call it, ideas and thoughts and different ways of doing things, so we can come up with something a bit fresher, rather than let's just plug it in. Give me the answer, same as everybody else. So that,
Mm.
and then also that, the other thing we do is we get our interns to come along to the meetings with the clients, because when you can actually hear from a client the tone, the type of person they are, whether they're a bit funny, whether they're quite serious, that really helps as well for them to get to know what they're writing about and what they're actually marketing. But you're right. I mean, the future like a lot of the jobs is can be done via AI, and then we just got to put the personal piece on it and the strategic piece.
And
Which is
it's a completely different conversation with particularly young people coming into those industries, or people
oh,
transitioning into industries. It's just they're going to need new skill sets, and that's difficult on everyone, including the people established in it, because they're not necessarily used to teaching it that way. You haven't gone down that path
so
before.
so true. And I have to be honest, is that look, I have been able to increase my margins, and I'm happy to share this. Look, from basically, a 25% margin to a 40% margin now because of AI. And, it is terrible that we can cut stuff, but the future, and we've seen it in Atlassian, it's just happened, he's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
cut hundreds because this is what's happening. So, if for any of the young people coming through who are listening, I would definitely suggest to them, and I say this to my kids, is, you want to start thinking, actually use your brain and start thinking differently to what everybody else is doing, because that will be the only thing going forward that is going to make you stand out and be unique from everybody else going for the same jobs.
So it's so interesting because it's certainly turned from
Or
what it used to be. Look, I want to pivot a little bit
Eh,
here to talk about Connection Central, because this really brings together everything you've discussed so far. It's a brilliant idea, I think. Just let everyone know what it is.
Sure. Well, Connection Central actually came up, it was 9 years in the making, but it came about because in December 24, we had stopped to look at the next year for strategies for our clients. And the election was coming up in May. Now, 10 years in the game, I know for sure that every single time there's an election, everything slows down, right? So what we did for all of our clients was we took them offline. So we put them into strategies. We went back to trade shows. We went back to live events. We went back to catch up for a lunch or a coffee meetings, all the old school stuff. But when I sat down and looked at our marketing, because I went, okay, as soon as, things get cut, it's HR training and marketing, right? So I said, what are we going to do? And the fastest way to convert a sale is to build trust with a face-to-face relationship. So it was time for Connection Central to be born. And to be honest, I really wasn't sure how it was all going to go, but I called up a bunch of mates and I said, guys, I'm running this event. I'm putting all the commercial industrial guys in a room together. Please just come. And I promise, we'll have great conversation and we'll share contacts. So that was the first event we launched, and I had 9 of them in the room, and it was amazing. It was amazing because I have a facilitator who builds the trust, and we do that with certain questions. And the main thing is that everybody is handpicked in the room, and everybody is an exceptional operator. And what that means is they care about their clients and they care about their staff, and they're doing a good job so they can all trust each other quickly. And so it was very fast that everyone just got on. We had the conversations, they shared contacts. People have come together. They've gone on to make millions of dollars in combining for tenders and contracts and things. And so now we've gone on to have more segments: aged care, childcare, all the different areas that people want to grow into. We're listening to our members, and we're creating as we go. So it's been amazing, actually, and I love it. We're learning so much along the way, which is the most important thing.
It really is the essence of bringing everything you were talking about together, isn't it? I love the idea that you've got the best people in the room as well, and that becomes important because when we're talking before about what is your aspiration there, if you're a young person coming into a career, it's not to be good at the tools, it's to be good at the people and pulling it all together. It is very different. I mean, it's probably always been the case that you really need to be good at people, but it's becoming front and center a focus. How does that then tie back to the technology angle here? I mean, I've sitting here in Connected Platforms offices where technology is obviously still essential for all of this? I mean, we've said the AI aspect is certainly impacting people, but when you have those people in the room, how were they thinking about the reliance on the technology? Is it something that is a bit of an afterthought that they go, well, hang on, this is what we want to build. I've got the right people for the job. We think about the technology later, or is it essential at the start? I'm just curious about that generally.
No, it's a great question. And I think two things. We are using AI. So, because we're handpicking the people, we're using AI to actually build out, we're inputting into our own little system, like who's who and who they're connected with and who they want to be connected with and all that sort of thing. So, basically, as a business owner, I can start to get myself out of the business, right? So the machine is doing that for us, so I don't have to do it all in my head. So that's one piece, which is really important. Um, the companies that are doing the best, and just to go back to your other point, as the Olympics are coming, right, and we all know that the staffing and shortages of staff are the biggest problem in every single meeting, right? Every meeting. So what we're finding is that all the good operators are coming together and collaborating, and they have to, because otherwise we're not going to be able to get everything done. That, which is really important, and I love to see that. But the other piece is that the really good operators, the businesses who are doing the best, are the ones who realize that they're using AI and technology for the processes and systems to make it more efficient. So all the admin tasks that can really be done by the machine, etc. Let the AI and let the technology do that. Let automate it, all that sort of stuff. And then they're using their people to get on the phones, because not many people want to get on the phones anymore, right? So they're building the relationship with the people. So perfect example. I'm sure Ben won't mind. I had Ben Campbell from Campbell Constructions, and he was explaining, they have built their own AI system. So there's so much, validity in it, where the system now, it allows the person to come in, fill in the form, it answers all the questions, they put in all their information, it gets it all to a point where basically the person then either just signs off on it, or goes, I just need this one piece. But what they've done is they've cut down what used to take 3 weeks for a building approval down to like 3 days. So that speed is phenomenal, right? And this is what companies need to do. So whether it's a touch point, like we always look at all the different touch points with the clients and how you can use the AI or the technology to speed up that process, right? So if businesses look at it that way, how can we minimize and all of that admin stuff? Like the efficiencies are going to be great, and then use the people for the personal piece, to be different to everybody else.
And that's a perfect example, because the construction one has blown my mind when I've seen some examples of this. Just how one example that was shown to me was a plan where normally it would take hours and hours to work out the materials that were needed, and the plan was just fed into one of these systems that spat out and said, this is your order, basically. That's it. Everything you need is on that order. Huge difference there. And the immediate concern, and it's a concern I share, is, well, what about those hours were jobs, right? Like that was jobs involved. But you're highlighting that it doesn't have to, it's not that it doesn't have to be that binary, but it's not that black and white. There's going to be layers where improved service delivery can come from the person who sits in the middle of that conversation.
Well, that's it, right? We were talking about this the other day. People expect more value for their money because they've got less money, right? But what does that value mean? Like, so, at the end of the day, whilst, I haven't got my phone, but we're all on these phones, right? And it's all becoming we're all separating more and more. And what we're all really looking for is connection and to belong and to be seen and heard. And so there is such a fine line for business between being efficient and providing solutions and creating strong and, ongoing customers. And I'm not going to say loyal because loyalty is sort of gone. Sadly, people are
Mm.
turning to the last page and looking at the price. And yeah, unfortunately, loyalty, I don't think exists. We have collaboration, but we don't necessarily have loyalty. So it's really important that we provide a solution, and the solution might cost this. But the companies that are going to succeed, I believe, then have that piece that you just said, which is the personal piece. And it's the only way I think business can go forward profitably and successfully. And if we do not combine the two, and I'm seeing it in different companies at the moment, and sadly, they are not going to, I really don't think they're going to survive because service is great. But if the customers don't want service, and well, they want service, but they don't want to pay for service,
Yes.
then, and they're turning to that last page and just looking for the price, then you have to comply. And the only way we can comply is to work out how we can cut, certain things through admin and then add value on the other end. So
And
it's
it's
going to be really
interesting.
interesting.
Well, because I was just thinking when you were talking about that you might have loyalty that's dead to a degree, but trust probably has been not exaggerated, elevated in this environment because ultimately you trust becomes even more important than it was before, and people will pay for trust even if they won't pay on the basis of loyalty.
That's so perfect. I did a talk on this the other day, actually, trust, connection, and the difference. And the thing is, that's the other thing, because businesses are going and people are going to get so busy. Well, they already are. People are exhausted already, and we're in March. So it's only going to go even further. And I think what people are realizing, though, is that they can't do everything, which is great because that creates an opportunity for other businesses to step in. So what we need to do then is we need to come with the trusted solution. You're right. And a solution that it's really clear that this is how I solve your problem. So that's the trusted solution. So you build that trust, and then you want to build the connection piece, as in, okay, now, this is what we can do, but we can also do this, this, and this because I can provide you extra value. And then the difference is the people piece. So, the companies that can become sticky, I call it, by offering sort of the one-stop shop because they have that collaboration with other companies, and they're yes, you come in for potentially, MSP IT work, but then we can also help you with this, 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 this. Don't worry, we have that trusted connection of group of people that we can help you with doing everything. And so when I talk about loyalty, whilst loyalty might be gone, that trust circle is very strong, I feel. And that's what we want to create for those customers around us, so they come into our trust circle.
I love that. Look,
Yeah.
I have to ask you, running these businesses across everything, as you said, busier, worn out by March. How do you do it? What's your angle here? Like, how does Michelle survive in an environment where you're doing all the things that you're doing? Because you will not be unique here, and I think a lot of people watching this will be going, "Yep, I'm under that same sort of pressure. What do I do?"
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I think it's really important. Alignment is the word that comes to mind. I have gotten to the point, and it's something that talking to a lot of business owners, I feel as well, is that getting really clear on your boundaries of, what you will and will not tolerate is really important. But also really working out who it is you want to play with. Because from an ideal client point of view, like, no one has the time or energy to deal with the tire kickers. We don't want them. Well, I don't want them, but some people want them. But if you don't want them, it's okay to not want them. Like, get super clear on who you want to play with, yeah, and in what sandpit. So I think that's the first thing, and that's what I do. I'm just like, and I won't ever be rude to anyone, but I don't. Yeah, you got to protect your energy. You got to protect your energy. Because there is only so much of it and there's only so much time. So that is one of the most important things for me. And then it's just to have some fun. I think, like I think I'm always going to be like a little kid, like I'm never going to grow up. So I just look for the people who I can have fun with and as much laughter as possible, and just doing things that feel good and right with the right people. I think that's the simple thing to success. And
And
then, of course, you've got to think of all the other business things. But
well, yeah, but I think that's going to become increasingly important with all the topics we've talked about, particularly that AI angle, that it's not less work. It should be in some ways, but it's actually creating more work because you're doing more things at once. And you do need to find that balance, or we will find some people will have nothing to do and others will have complete burnout. It is an important topic, I think. Look, last question to wrap this sort of discussion up, which has just been fantastic. What do you think the next few years look like for you? I mean, you've obviously talked about where you are currently with some of this AI and some of your predictions there, but let's get into the wildly speculative mode. What does it look like for the businesses that you're doing, the connections that you're making, just generally? What's your sort of prediction out for the next few years?
yeah, wow. I think I think the gap is widening between the companies who are using AI, are adaptive and agile, versus the companies sadly that will be left behind. There's a lot of private equity. There's a lot of buying, acquiring going on, getting us. But I think more of that will happen. The bigger boys will come. They'll gobble up the little guys. But as a result of that, I think all companies need to be getting ready to sell, because I mean, you never know when the opportunity might come,
Mm.
and you might want to get out. But I think the most important thing with all of that, is that it, business has changed. Business has changed, and we really need to, as business owners, be adaptive and agile and open to all the change. I think that is the most important thing. And the people who aren't ready to do that, like, get out now. Get out now. And if you are, then start to surround yourself with the people who know what they're talking about. And, like the guys at Connected Platforms, in regards when it comes to technology, when it comes to AI, all that sort of stuff, like, talk to them now, because we need to start putting all those things in place now in order to keep going for the future.
Look, Michelle, this has been an absolutely wonderful, wide ranging conversation beyond my wildest expectations for our first episode. So, thank you so much for all of that. Look, if people want to get in touch with you or learn more about some of the things that you're talking about, particularly that networking opportunity, I think is quite special. How do they go about that?
Look, I love LinkedIn. So find me, Michelle O'Hara, on LinkedIn. Very active. And otherwise, you can go to our website at connectioncentral.com.au. Or otherwise, give me a call. I'll always answer the phone as well, unusually. But this has been absolutely wonderful. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Look, I know it's about providing value. That's what we're trying to do here. And there was so much value provided in that conversation. I'm sure our audience is going to love this. If you have a Queensland business story that our audience would also be interested, reach out. You can reach us at connectedplatforms.com.au. We'd love to hear from you. Also, we highly value any feedback, what you like, what you don't like, what you want us to change. We're playing around with this and it'll settle into a format, but we're still playing with it. So let us know. And if you really love the content, please consider giving us a Google review, because as everyone watching this will know, there is often no better way to show your support of local businesses than that Google review. It still is very valuable, even in this AI world. Look, thank you again, Michelle. Really appreciated that. Love the conversation. We'll be back again next week with a brand new Queensland business story. So thank you, everyone, for watching, and let's stay connected.